The envelope the billionaire handed Sophia contained evidence that shattered her reality. He was her biological father, dying of cancer with only months to live. Her knees buckled beneath her as 5 years of quietly serving this stranger transformed into an inheritance offer worth billions, and a desperate race against time to know the father she never knew existed. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. The first time Sophia Miller served Harrison Blackwood, she barely noticed him. In the 5-star restaurant where she worked, powerful men in expensive suits were as common as the Kobe beef on the menu. They all blurred together after a while, demanding, particular, and rarely seeing her as anything more than the hands that delivered their food. That day, 5 years ago, he had been just another businessman in a Tom Ford suit, requesting a specific table by the window with a view of the city's skyline. Table 7, creature of habit, he'd said, offering no further explanation. Sophia had served him with professional courtesy, not too familiar, not too distant, perfect, really. He left a generous tip, but nothing outlandish, nothing to suggest he would become a fixture in her life, a silent witness to her struggles and triumphs over the next half-decade. But he returned the following Tuesday, requesting table 7 and Sophia specifically, and then again the next week, and the next, until Tuesday lunch with Mr. Blackwood became as reliable as the restaurant's souffle. He asked for you by name, her manager Vincent had told her after the 3rd week. Says you don't hover. Apparently that's a compliment. 5 years later, Sophia could recite Mr. Blackwood's preferences from memory. Sparkling water, no ice, steak, medium rare, no sauce, a glass of Bordeaux, but only if he closed a deal, coffee, black, regardless of the hour, no dessert except on the anniversary of some date he never explained, when he would order 2 slices of chocolate cake and eat only 1. He tipped exactly 25%, never spoke on his phone at the table, and rarely brought guests. When he did, they were serious people with serious expressions who spoke in hushed tones about acquisitions and market shares and quarterly projections. Harrison Blackwood was worth billions. Sophia had Googled him after the 6th or 7th lunch. His company, Blackwood Innovations, had revolutionized sustainable energy storage. The technology had made him one of the wealthiest men in the country and a regular on magazine covers. But in the restaurant, he was simply a creature of habit who appreciated her unobtrusive service. She knew his quirks, but nothing of substance about the man himself. He'd never asked about her life either, maintaining the comfortable boundary between server and serve. Occasionally, she caught him observing her, not in the predatory way some wealthy men watch the female staff, but with a curious, almost analytical gaze that made her feel like a puzzle he was trying to solve. Over those 5 years, Sophia's life had transformed dramatically, though invisibly to her Tuesday regular. She'd started at the restaurant as a full-time waitress with dreams of medical school. Now at 28, she was finishing her 3rd year of medical study, working limited shifts to pay for the portion of tuition her scholarships didn't cover. The restaurant had accommodated her changing schedule because she was exceptional at her job, and because regulars like Mr. Blackwood requested her. She only worked lunch shifts now, Tuesdays for Mr. Blackwood and weekends for the extra tips. "You're looking tired today, Ms. Miller," Mr. Blackwood remarked one Tuesday, surprising her with the personal observation. It was the week of her pathology finals, and she had been studying until 3 a.m. "Just busy with school, sir," she replied, pouring his sparkling water without making eye contact. "Medical school, correct? 3rd year now." Sophia nearly spilled the water. In 5 years of service, this was the first indication he knew anything about her life. "Yes. How did you—" "I pay attention," he said simply, unfolding his napkin. "The textbooks you sometimes carry, the dark circles under your eyes during exam periods, the hospital eyeder partially visible in your bag last month." She didn't know whether to be impressed or unnerved. "Pathology this semester?" he asked, gesturing to the coffee stain on her sleeve that she'd frantically tried to remove after spilling on her notes that morning. "Yes," she admitted. "Finals this week." He nodded, then returned to his menu as if the momentary breach in their professional dynamic had never occurred. She took his order the usual, and their interaction returned to its comfortable pattern. That had been yesterday. Today, a Wednesday, was unusual because Mr. Blackwood never came on Wednesdays. Yet Vincent had called Sophia that morning asking her to come in for a special request. "Mr. Blackwood has reserved table 7 for 1 p.m. and asked for you specifically." Vincent explained, his tone conveying both confusion and the certainty that whatever Harrison Blackwood wanted, Harrison Blackwood would get. So Sophia had rescheduled her study group and arrived at the restaurant in her crisp uniform, her hair neatly pinned back, dark circles concealed as best she could with drugstore concealer. When Mr. Blackwood arrived, he wasn't alone. 3 other men in equally expensive suits accompanied him. She recognized one as his company's CFO from a magazine article she'd read. The others were strangers to her, but they carried themselves with the unmistakable confidence of men accustomed to power. "Ms. Miller," Mr. Blackwood greeted her with a slight nod. "Thank you for accommodating us today." "Of course, sir," she replied, falling easily into her professional persona. "Would you like your usual sparkling water?" "Yes, for everyone, please." She served them efficiently, noting that Mr. Blackwood seemed more tense than usual. His companion spoke in hushed tones about projections and board approvals, occasionally falling silent when she approached the table. It wasn't until the main course had been cleared that something shifted in the atmosphere. The men exchanged glances, and one of them nodded almost imperceptibly to Mr. Blackwood, who reached into his suit jacket and removed a cream-colored envelope. "Miller," he said, his voice different somehow, less certain than she'd ever heard it. "I have something for you." He extended the envelope toward her. It was heavy, expensive paper with her full name, Sophia Elizabeth Miller, handwritten on the front in elegant script. "Sir?" she questioned, hesitating to take it. "Please," he said, his blue eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her stomach tighten. "This is long overdue." Confused but professional as always, Sophia accepted the envelope. It was heavier than she expected, sealed with wax embossed with the Blackwood Innovations logo. "Should I ... single quote," she began, unsure of protocol. "Open it now if you would," he said. And it wasn't quite a command, but carried the expectation of compliance that came naturally to men of his position. The restaurant continued to buzz around them, but at table 7, time seemed suspended as Sophia carefully broke the wax seal and withdrew several documents from within. The first was a letter on Blackwood Innovations letterhead. "Dear Ms. Miller," it began. Her eyes scanned the opening paragraph and her breath caught in her throat. The room began to spin slightly. "Is this some kind of joke?" she whispered, looking up at Miss R. Blackwood, whose expression remained solemn. "No joke," he said quietly. "Please, continue reading." She returned to the letter, her hands now trembling so badly the paper rattled. Behind the letter were legal documents, and behind those, photographs. Old, faded images that made her heart stutter in her chest. The weight of what she was reading crashed down on her. 5 years of serving this man his sparkling water without ice. 5 years of perfect professional 5 years, and he had known all along. "This can't be true," she said, her voice breaking, tears welling in her eyes despite her desperate attempt to maintain composure. "I assure you it is," Mr. Blackwood replied, his own voice thick with emotion now. Every word. The document slipped from Sophia's fingers, scattering slightly on the table. 5 years of Mystery Tuesdays and chocolate cake anniversaries suddenly took on new meaning. The room swam before her eyes, the faces of the businessmen blurring as tears spilled onto her cheeks. "Why now?" she managed to ask, barely able to form the words. "After all this time, why tell me now?" Harrison Blackwood, the man she had served faithfully for 5 years, the billionaire who had changed the world with his innovation, the Tuesday regular who preferred his steak medium rare with no sauce, looked at her with eyes that now unmistakably mirrored her own. "Because," he said softly, "I'm running out of time." The restaurant seemed to fade away around Sophia, the ambient chatter of diners and the clinking of silverware receding into a muffled hum. Her eyes kept returning to the photographs, particularly one showing a young woman with her exact smile, standing beside a much younger Harrison Blackwood. The date on the back read June 1995. "Miss Miller." "Sophia, perhaps we should continue this conversation somewhere more private," Harrison suggests, voice gentle as he observed her distress. She nodded mutely, unable to trust her voice. Vincent appeared at her side, alerted by one of Harrison's companions. "Take as much time as you need," he said, his usual brisk tone softened with concern. "Use the private dining room." Harrison stood, nodding to his associates. "Gentlemen, please proceed without me. Martin, you can handle the Williams meeting. I'll join you for dinner." The men gathered their things, exchanging significant glances, but asking no questions. One of them, the CFO she recognized, briefly touched Harrison's shoulder before departing, a gesture so intimate it seemed out of place in the choreographed formality of their world. Sophia followed Harrison in a daze, clutching the envelope to her chest like a shield. The private dining room was elegant, with heavy curtains and sound-dampening walls that created a cocoon of silence when the door closed behind them. "Please sit," Harrison said, gesturing to a plush chair. She remained standing. "You knew," she accused, finding her voice at last. "For 5 years you knew who I was, and you said nothing. You watched me struggle through medical school, working doubles to make rent, and you just ... observed like some kind of experiment." Harrison's composure cracked slightly. "It wasn't like that. Then what was it like?" she demanded, anger displacing shock. "The letter says you're my father," he finished quietly. "My father died when I was 2, Sophia said automatically, repeating what her mother had always told her. "Your stepfather died when you were 2, Harrison corrected. "Richard Miller was a good man who married your mother when you were 9 months old. He loved you as his own. The accident that took him was a tragedy." Sophia's knees weakened and she finally sank into the chair. "My mother never told me. She promised Richard she wouldn't," Harrison said, taking the seat across from her. "It was part of their agreement. He wanted to be your father in every way that mattered." "And you? What did you want?" Sophia's voice was razor sharp. Harrison's gaze dropped to his hands, strong, manicured hands that had never changed a diaper or bandaged a scraped knee or held hers while crossing the street. "At 24, building my company was all I cared about," he admitted. "When your mother told me she was pregnant, I panicked. I wasn't ready to be a father. I offered financial support, but nothing more." "How generous," Sophia said coldly. "I'm not proud of it," Harrison replied, surprising her with his candor. "Catherine, your mother refused anyway. She met Richard shortly after and he embraced you both completely. When they married, I signed away my parental rights. It seemed like the best solution for everyone." Sophia picked up one of the photographs, a young woman with auburn hair and laughing eyes, heavily pregnant, sitting in a garden. "Why didn't she ever tell me? Even after she remarried, after my stepfather died, I had a right to know." Harrison sighed. "She kept her promise to Richard. And later I think she was protecting you from me, or rather, from what I became." "The great Harrison Blackwood," Sophia murmured, the pieces starting to fit together. "Wait, did she know you were my Tuesday regular?" Has she been in on this this surveillance? No, he said firmly. The first time I saw you was purely coincidental. I came to the restaurant for a business lunch 5 years ago, and there you were, looking so much like your mother, but with my eyes, my grandfather's chin. I knew immediately, but you said nothing. What right did I have? He asked simply. I'd signed you away. I'd never fought to be part of your life. I told myself I was respecting Catherine's wishes by keeping my distance, but you kept coming back, Sophia said, the realization dawning. Every Tuesday for 5 years. I wanted to see who you had become without my influence, he admitted. At first I told myself it was just curiosity. Then it became necessary. The highlight of my week. The chocolate cake, Sophia said suddenly. You always order 2 slices on March 17th, but only eat 1. A small smile touched Harrison's lips. Your birthday. I couldn't celebrate with you, but I couldn't let it pass unmarked either. The gesture, both sweet and profoundly sad, punctured some of her anger. Why tell me now? Your note said you're running out of time. Harrison unbuttoned his left cuff and rolled it back, revealing a medical alert bracelet. Pancreatic cancer. Stage 4. It's aggressive, and I've exhausted the standard treatments. The specialists give me 6 to 8 months. Sophia's medical training kicked in automatically. There are experimental trials, targeted therapies. I've tried them, he interrupted gently. My team has consulted every specialist worldwide. I've made peace with it. The clinical part of Sophia's brain processed this information while the emotional part reeled. The man she'd just discovered was her biological father was dying before she'd had a chance to know him. Why wait until now? She asked again, softness creeping into her voice despite herself. You could have told me years ago. Harrison's expression tightened with regret, fear at first, then a kind of superstition, as if watching you succeed from afar was a spell I couldn't break. I was afraid that disrupting your life would somehow derail all you were accomplishing. You were so focused, so determined. That wasn't your decision to make, Sophia said. But her anger had cooled to something more like sorrow. No, it wasn't, he agreed. It was selfish in its own way. But when the diagnosis came, he gestured to the envelope. There are things you need to know, preparations to be made. Sophia looked down at the legal documents she hadn't fully examined. What kind of preparations? I've made you my heir, Harrison said simply. Blackwood Innovations, the foundation, all of it. With the right guidance, you won't have to work another shift in this restaurant. You can finish medical school without debt. Establish research in whatever field interests you. Sophia laughed, a strangled sound without humor. You can't be serious. I don't know the first thing about running a multi-billion-dollar company. You won't have to, not at first. The board will handle daily operations. Martin, the gentleman you recognized, has been with me from the beginning. He'll guide you. And if I refuse? Sophia challenged. What if I don't want your money or your company or this burden you've waited until the last minute to drop in my lap? Harrison didn't flinch. Then it goes to the foundation with specific directives, but I hope you'll consider it. Not for my sake, but for what you could do with those resources. The medical research you could fund, the lives you could change. He knew exactly what button to push. Her lifelong dream of making a difference in medicine. Sophia felt manipulated and tempted in equal measure. Did you investigate me? She asked suddenly. Beyond what you observed during our Tuesday lunches? Harrison had the grace to look uncomfortable. I made certain inquiries about your academic performance, your financial situation. Nothing invasive, that's debatable, Sophia muttered. She stood and paced the small room, trying to process everything. Does my mother know you're doing this? I spoke to Catherine last week, he admitted. After 26 years, I broke my silence. She wasn't pleased, but she understands my reason. I need to talk to her, Sophia said, pulling out her phone. Of course. She dialed, and her mother answered on the second ring. Mom, it's me. I'm at the restaurant, and Harrison Blackwood is here, he says, her voice cracked. Oh, Sophia, her mother sighed on the other end, confirming with those 2 words everything Harrison had told her. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I wanted to tell you myself, but he insisted. Are you okay? No, Sophia answered honestly. I don't know what I am. Can I come over after my shift? I'll be waiting. Sophia ended the call and turned back to Harrison, seeing him with new eyes. Not as the intimidating billionaire who preferred sparkling water without ice, but as a dying man trying to make amends for a lifetime of absence. I have 3 hours left on my shift, she said, her professional mask sliding back into place like armor. I can speak to your manager. No, she interrupted firmly. I've finished what I started. I always have. We can continue this conversation afterward if you'd like. Harrison studied her for a moment, then nodded with something like respect. I've taken a suite at the Four Seasons across the street. Whenever you're ready. Sophia gathered the documents and photographs, returning them to the envelope with trembling hands. I'll come, but I'm not promising anything. I need time to think. Time, Harrison echoed with a sad smile. The one thing I can't give you enough of. As Sophia turned to leave, he spoke again. For what it's worth, I'm incredibly proud of the woman you've become. Without any help from me. She paused at the door, not turning back. Mr. Blackwood? Yes? Your usual table will be waiting for you next Tuesday. Until then, it was the only promise she could make, that whatever happened next, Whatever she decided, their strange ritual would continue for as long as he had left. Completing her shift was the hardest 3 hours of Sophia's professional life. She moved through the restaurant on autopilot, taking orders, delivering food, smiling at appropriate moments. But inside, she was in free fall. Harrison remained in the private dining room working on his laptop. Occasionally, their eyes would meet across the restaurant, and Sophia would feel a jolt of recognition that she'd somehow missed for 5 years. The shape of his eyes, the way his brow furrowed in concentration, she saw these same features in her mirror every morning. When her shift finally ended, Sophia changed out of her uniform in the employee bathroom. She stared at her reflection, searching for Harrison in her features. The high cheekbones were her mother's, but the deep-set blue eyes, how had she never realized they were nothing like her mother's warm brown ones, or her stepfather's gentle hazel? She texted her mother that she was coming over, then slipped out the staff entrance, avoiding Harrison for now. She needed her mother's perspective before she could face him again. Catherine Miller lived in the same modest 2-bedroom apartment where Sophia had grown up. It was small but meticulously maintained, filled with books and plants and the faint scent of the cinnamon tea her mother always drank. When Catherine opened the door, her eyes were red-rimmed. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, pulling Sophia into a fierce hug. "I'm so sorry you found out this way." Inside, Sophia sank onto the familiar couch, clutching a mug of tea, more for comfort than from any desire to drink it. The envelope sat on the coffee table between them like a live grenade. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" Sophia asked, the question that had been burning in her since Harrison's revelation. Catherine wrapped her cardigan tighter around herself, a protective gesture Sophia recognized from childhood discussions about money troubles or her stepfather's death. "At first it was for Richard," she began. "He loved you so completely from the moment he met you. The adoption was his idea. He wanted to be your father legally, not just in name. Harrison agreed to terminate his parental rights, and Richard made me promise that you would never feel like you weren't fully his. And after Dad died," Sophia pressed, the word Dad referring to the only father she'd known until today. Catherine's eyes filled with tears. "By then, Harrison was becoming who he is now. Famous. Powerful. I was afraid." "Afraid of what?" "That he'd change his mind. That he'd try to take you away, or worse, come into your life just enough to hurt you when he left again." Catherine reached for her daughter's hand. "You were already dealing with so much grief over Richard. I couldn't bear to complicate your life with another father who might disappoint you." Sophia absorbed this, trying to understand her mother's reasoning. "But as I got older, the longer I waited, the harder it became to find the right moment." "How do you tell your teenage daughter that her biological father is someone she sees on magazine covers?" Catherine shook her head. "I convinced myself I was protecting you, but maybe I was just protecting myself from having to explain choices I made when I was young and scared." "Tell me about it," Sophia said. "About you and Harrison. The whole story." Catherine leaned back, her expression distant as she revisited memories from another life. "I was 22, working as an administrative assistant at the firm that first invested in his company. He was brilliant, intense, completely focused on his vision. We had a brief relationship, 3 months, that's all." "Did you love him?" "I thought I did," Catherine admitted. "But what I loved was the idea of him, the potential. When I told him I was pregnant, I saw the real Harrison, someone who couldn't make room in his life for anything that didn't serve his ambitions." She sipped her tea before continuing. "He offered money, as if that would solve everything. I refused. I was young and proud and heartbroken. 2 months later, I met Richard at a friend's birthday party. He was kind, steady, already established in his career. When I told him about the pregnancy on our 3rd date, expecting him to disappear, he asked if he could come to my next doctor's appointment instead." Tears slipped down Catherine's cheeks. "Richard chose to be your father, Sophia. Harrison chose his company. But you kept the ultrasound pictures," Sophia said, gesturing to the photographs in the envelope. "You kept evidence of him." "I kept memories of that time in my life," Catherine corrected. "Not of him specifically." Sophia hesitated before asking her next question. "When did you find out he was my Tuesday regular?" "Last week when he called me," Catherine said, looking troubled. "I had no idea before then. It's unsettling to say the least. If I'd known, I would have told you immediately." Sophia nodded, believing her. "He's dying." "I know," Catherine said softly. "That's the only reason I agreed not to fight this. He has so little time left, and maybe knowing you would bring him some peace." "What about my peace?" Sophia asked, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. "He watched me for 5 years without saying anything. Now he's making me his heir, to his company, his fortune, everything. How am I supposed to handle that?" Catherine reached across and took her daughter's hands. "You don't have to accept any of it. You owe him nothing. But if I don't, what happens to everything? The company employs thousands of people. The foundation funds important research. That's not your responsibility," Catherine insisted. "Harrison created this situation. Let his board of directors figure it out." Sophia stared at the envelope. "He said he's proud of me." "Of course he is," Catherine said. "Okay, how could anyone not be?" "But Sophia, being proud of someone from a distance isn't the same as being there for the hard parts. The ordinary moments that make up a life." They sat in silence for a few minutes, the weight of the past and the uncertain future hanging between them. "I told him I'd meet him at his hotel after I talked to you," Sophia finally said. "I should go." Catherine's expression tightened with worry. "Are you sure?" "You can stay here tonight, process everything before seeing him again." Sophia shook her head. "He doesn't have much time, and neither do I if I want answers." Her mother nodded in understanding. "Just remember, whatever he offers, whatever he says, you get to decide what role he plays in your life now, on your term, not his." Single quotes. Sophia hugged her mother tightly before gathering the envelope in her courage. The Four Seasons was only a 15-minute walk from her mother's apartment, but it might as well have been in another world. The gleaming tower with its uniformed doorman and marble lobby represented everything that separated Harrison Blackwood's existence from the life she had known. At the front desk, she gave her name, half expecting to be turned away despite Harrison's invitation. Instead, the receptionist immediately called upstairs, then directed her to the private elevator that would take her to the penthouse suite. The elevator opened directly into a sprawling space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Harrison stood by the window, still in his suit pants but with his jacket removed and shirt sleeves rolled up, revealing the medical alert bracelet. He turned when she entered, his expression cautiously hopeful. "You came," he said simply. "I said I would." Sophia remained by the elevator, maintaining distance. "I talked to my mother, and she confirmed everything. She also thinks I should walk away from all of this." Harrison nodded. "That's her maternal instinct to protect you. I respect it, but you disagree. I believe you're strong enough to handle this," he said. "I wouldn't have approached you otherwise." Sophia moved further into the room, setting the envelope on a glass coffee table. 5 years, Harrison. You watched me for 5 years without saying a word. That's not the behavior of someone who respects boundaries. He accepted the rebuke without argument. You're right. It was selfish. I wanted to know you without the complication of being known in return. And now I want whatever relationship you're willing to offer, even if it's just executor of my estate. Sophia studied him. This stranger who was half of her DNA, this powerful man now humbled by mortality. "I have questions. I expected nothing less." Harrison gestured to the comfortable seating area. "Would you like something to drink?" "No." She sat anyway, perched on the edge of an armchair. "First question. When were you diagnosed?" 8 months ago, he answered promptly. "I sought treatment immediately, but the cancer was already advanced." "And you didn't think to contact me then?" "I thought about it every day," he admitted, "but I convinced myself it would be cruel to enter your life only to leave it again so quickly." "What changed?" Harrison sat across from her, his movements deliberate, as if conserving energy. "My oncologist made it clear that experimental treatments weren't working. The timeline became ... concrete, and selfishly I didn't want to die a stranger to my only child." His candor was disarming. Sophia pushed forward. "The company, the inheritance, why not just set up a trust? Why make me the heir to responsibilities I never asked for?" "Because you're capable," he said without hesitation. "More than capable. I've watched you manage impossible schedules, handle difficult customers with grace, study for medical exams while working full shifts. You have both the intelligence and the temperament to handle Blackwood innovations." "You don't know me," Sophia insisted. "You've seen a carefully maintained professional persona for a few hours each week." "Perhaps," Harrison conceded. "But I've also had you extensively vetted by people whose job it is to evaluate character and capability." The admission should have angered her, but Sophia was too exhausted for more outrage. "You had me investigated. Assessed," he corrected gently. "Before entrusting you with the work of my lifetime, yes." She rubbed her temples, feeling a headache forming. "This is insane. It's a lot to process," Harrison acknowledged. "You don't have to decide anything tonight or tomorrow. I've arranged for you to have time to consider everything." "What do you mean, you've arranged for me to have time?" Sophia asked, suddenly alert to the implication in Harrison's words. Harrison walked to a sideboard and poured himself a glass of water, his movements measured but slightly stiff, a detail Sophia's medical training recognized as someone managing pain. "I've spoken with Vincent," he explained. "You've been granted a leave of absence from the restaurant with full pay, and I've contacted your medical school. Your tuition for the remainder of your education has been covered, along with a stipend that eliminates the need for you to work while completing your studies." Sophia stood abruptly. "You had no right. Those are my responsibilities, my choices." "Consider it 26 years of back child support," Harrison said, a hint of his business acumen showing through. "I'm not asking for anything in return, whether you accept the larger inheritance or not. This support is yours unconditionally. You can't just step in and rearrange my life." Sophia protested, though part of her, the exhausted part that had been working double shifts for years, felt a treacherous relief at the thought of focusing solely on her studies. "I understand it feels intrusive," Harrison acknowledged, "but it was the one thing I could offer immediately that would make a tangible." Sophia paced the luxurious room, trying to process everything. The penthouse suite was larger than her entire apartment. The disparity between their lives was staggering. "You said you have a team of doctors," she said, changing the subject. "What treatments have you tried?" Harrison seemed to appreciate the shift to a more clinical discussion. He outlined his medical journey with the precision of someone accustomed to detailed briefings. The initial diagnosis, the surgery that revealed the cancer, had already spread. The rounds of chemotherapy and radiation, the immunotherapy trials. Sophia listened with her newly acquired medical knowledge, asking pointed questions about dosages and protocols. It was easier somehow to approach him as a case study rather than as her dying father. "Have you considered the trial at Johns Hopkins?" she asked. "They're using a new approach to target the specific genetic markers in pancreatic cancer." Harrison looked genuinely surprised. "You're familiar with that research?" "It's what I want to specialize in," Sophia said, then caught herself. "Oncology, specifically targeting aggressive cancers with poor prognoses. I've been following Dr. Reynolds' work since my first year." "I wasn't aware," Harrison said softly. And for the first time, Sophia saw real regret in his eyes. Not just for the years missed, but for how little he truly knew about her passions, her dreams. There's a lot you don't know about me, she said, the statement free of accusation. Simply fact. I'd like to learn, he replied, whatever you're willing to share. Sophia studied him, the billionaire inventor now humbled by biology. Have you applied for the Hopkins trial? My team investigated it, but I didn't qualify. My cancer has a genetic variation that falls outside their target parameters. Sophia nodded, her mind already running through other possibilities. It was instinctive, the problem-solving approach she brought to every challenge. I'll need to see your complete medical records if I'm going to help you explore options, she said, then paused, realizing she'd just volunteered to involve herself in his care. Harrison caught it too, a small smile touching his lips. Does that mean you're staying? It means I'm a third-year medical student who hates unsolved problems, she clarified. Don't read too much in. Of course, he agreed, but the hope in his eyes was unmistakable. The records can be sent to you tomorrow. Sophia moved back to the seating area, this time choosing a more comfortable position on the sofa. Tell me about the company. If you're serious about making me your heir, I need to understand what I'd be inheriting. For the next hour, Harrison outlined the structure of Blackwood Innovations, the core energy storage technology that had made him a billion. The subsidiaries focused on implementation across different industries, the research division pursuing next-generation solutions, and the foundation that channeled profits into environmental and educational initiatives. Sophia listened, asked sharp questions, and took mental notes. The business itself was fascinating. Harrison had built something genuinely revolutionary, something that was helping transition the world away from fossil fuels. Despite herself, she was impressed. The board will manage day-to-day operations, Harrison explained. Martin Chung, whom you met today, would be your primary advisor. He's been with me since the beginning and knows every aspect of the business. You would set strategic direction and approve major initiatives, but you wouldn't need to be involved in daily management. And if I wanted to direct resources toward medical research, cancer research specifically, Harrison's expression softened. You'd have complete authority to establish new priorities for the foundation. The board might argue, but ultimately, as controlling shareholder, you would have the final say. Sophia nodded slowly, possibilities taking shape in her mind. The resources Harrison commanded could fund breakthrough research, accelerate clinical trials, bring treatments to patients years faster than the traditional path. I need time to think about all this, she said finally. Of course. Harrison looked at his watch. It's getting late. Would you like my driver to take you home? I can manage, Sophia said, standing. The evening had drained her, and she suddenly felt the weight of her double shift and the emotional upheaval. Harrison rose as well, moving with the careful precision of someone managing pain. Before you go, there's one more thing. He walked to a desk and removed a small wooden box from the drawer. This belongs to you, regardless of what you decide about the rest. He handed her the box. Inside, nestled in velvet, was a delicate silver locket. Sophia lifted it carefully, opening the clasp to reveal a tiny photograph of an infant. Herself, she realized, and a lock of baby hair. I kept this, Harrison said quietly. Your mother sent me a birth announcement with this photograph. I've carried it with me for 26 years. Sophia's throat tightened. The locket complicated the narrative she'd constructed of Harrison as someone who had simply written her off. Why keep this if you wanted nothing to do with me? I never said I wanted nothing to do with you, Harrison corrected gently. I said I wasn't ready to be a father. Those are different things. Not to a child, Sophia countered. No, he agreed. Not to a child. But I'm not asking the child you were to understand. I'm asking the woman you were to consider that people make mistakes they spend a lifetime regretting. The sincerity in his voice was impossible to dismiss. Sophia closed the locket and returned it to the box, but she took the box with her. I'll call you tomorrow about the medical records, she said, moving toward the elevator. Thank you for coming, Harrison replied. And Sophia? I know. This is overwhelming. Take whatever time you need. She nodded and stepped into the elevator. As the doors closed, she caught a final glimpse of Harrison Blackwood, billionaire, genius, biological father, standing alone in his penthouse, looking suddenly smaller and more vulnerable than she had ever seen him at the restaurant. Back in her tiny apartment, Sophia placed the wooden box on her nightstand and sank onto her bed, still fully clothed. The events of the day played through her mind on an exhausting loop. She reached for her phone and texted her best friend Aiden, a fellow medical student who had been her emotional support through the rigors of their education. Something huge happened. Can you meet for coffee tomorrow before class? His reply came quickly. Of course. 7:30 at Millie's? Perfect. And Aiden? My life just got completely weird. Now I'm intrigued. See you tomorrow. Sophia set her alarm, knowing she should shower and prepare for tomorrow, but fatigue overtook her. Fell asleep still wearing her clothes. The wooden box containing her infant photograph within arm's reach, and dreamed of two fathers. One she had loved and lost, and one she had just found and might lose too soon. The next morning, Sophia arrived at Millie's coffee shop 20 minutes early, desperate for caffeine and time to organize her thoughts before explaining the situation to Aiden. The cafe was their regular meeting spot, equidistant between their apartments and serving the strongest coffee near campus. She ordered her usual, a large dark roast, black, claimed their favorite corner table. Outside, the city was coming to life, the early morning light giving everything a golden hue that belied the turmoil in her mind. When Aiden arrived, his curly hair still damp from the shower, he took one look at her face and said, "Okay, this is serious. You've got the same expression you had before our pathology final. It's worse than pathology," Sophia replied, waiting until he had his coffee before launching into the story. Harrison Blackwood's 5 years as her Tuesday regular. The envelope, the revelation of her paternity, the inheritance. All of it. Aiden listened without interrupting, his eyes widening as the story unfolded. When she finished, he let out a low whistle. Holy crap, Soph. I don't even know what that is. It's a mess, she supplied. It's a Netflix series, he countered, then grew serious. How are you feeling about all this? Sophia stared into her coffee. Angry, confused, curious, overwhelmed. Take your pick. You're allowed to feel all of those things at once, Aiden said, stirring his coffee thoughtfully. This is ... unprecedented. That's one word for it, Sophia agreed. The thing is I don't know what to do next. If I accept his offer to pay for school, am I obligated to accept the rest? If I look at his medical records, does that mean I'm forgiving him for disappearing for 26 years? Aiden considered this. I don't think investigating treatment options means you're absolving him of anything. You do the same for any patient. But he's not just any patient, Sophia countered. That's the whole problem. Okay, let's break this down, Aiden suggested, slipping into the analytical mode that made him an excellent study partner. Separate the issues. First, the financial support for your education. That's something he owes you, regardless of your relationship going forward. You can accept that without accepting anything else. Sophia nodded slowly. That makes sense. And it would be a relief not to worry about rent and tuition. Exactly. Second issue, his medical care. You're almost a doctor, and you're specifically interested in these types of cancers. Looking at his case is professional development. Plus, it might help you understand his situation better. Right, Sophia agreed, feeling slightly more centered with this logical framework. Third issue. The inheritance, the company, the foundation, all of it. That's the big one. And you don't have to decide right away. You can learn more, meet the board members, understand what you'd be getting into before making a decision. And fourth, Sophia added, the personal relationship. Whether I want a father who's only going to be in my life for a few months. Aiden reached across the table and squeezed her hand. That's the hardest part. But Soph, you're one of the strongest people I know. Whatever you decide, I'm here for you. His steady support settled something in her. Thanks, Aiden. I think I need to take this one step at a time. So what's step one? Sophia checked her watch. Get his medical records. See if there's anything his doctors have missed. Classic Sophia. Aiden smiled. Tackle the problem you can solve. It's what I do, she agreed with a small smile. I should get going. I've got to call Harrison about the records before class. Outside the cafe, Sophia made the call. Harrison answered immediately as if he'd been waiting by the phone. Good morning, Sophia. Did you sleep well? Well enough, she replied, not wanting to get into pleasantries. I'd like to review your medical records today if possible. Of course, Harrison said, his tone shifting to business-like efficiency. I'll have them sent to you immediately. Would you prefer digital copies or hard copies? Both, Sophia decided. And I'll need the contact information for your primary oncologist. Consider it done. Anything else? Sophia hesitated, then added, I've decided to accept the financial support for my education. Doesn't mean I've made any decisions about the rest. I understand, Harrison replied, and she could hear the carefully contained happiness in his voice. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to help with that at least. I have to go to class, Sophia said, not sure how to end the conversation. Of course. I'll see you next Tuesday. The question felt loaded now, their Tuesday ritual transformed from professional obligation to something much more complicated. Yes, she confirmed, unless your doctors advise against it. They've given up trying to restrict my activities, Harrison said with a hint of the stubborn determination that had built his empire. Tuesday it is. By the time Sophia reached her apartment that evening, both a digital file and a thick envelope of medical records had been delivered. She spread the papers across her small kitchen table, scanning lab reports, surgical notes, treatment plans, and follow-up assessments. The picture they painted was grim. Harrison's cancer had been discovered late, already metastasized to his liver. The standard treatments had bought him time but hadn't significantly reduced the tumor burden. The experimental immunotherapies had shown initial promise before failing. Sophia created a timeline of his treatment, noting decision points and outcomes. Her medical training was still developing, but she had a natural aptitude for recognizing patterns and spotting overlooked possibilities. After 3 hours of intense concentration, she noticed something in his genetic panel, a mutation that might make him eligible for a different trial than the one at Johns Hopkins. It was a long shot, but worth exploring. She emailed Harrison's oncologist, Dr. Eleanor Chun, introducing herself and requesting a conversation. The response came within minutes, suggesting a video call the next morning. Satisfied that she'd made progress on at least one front, Sophia finally allowed herself to examine the other documents Harrison had given her. The inheritance paper. The legal language was dense, but the essence was clear. Upon Harrison's death, Sophia would become the majority shareholder of Blackwood Innovation, with controlling interest in both the company and the foundation. There were provisions for a transitional period during which the current board would maintain operational control while she learned the business. The estimated value of her inheritance made her head spin. Billions. With a B. More money than she could comprehend, let alone spend in a lifetime. Tucked behind the formal documents was a personal letter, handwritten on heavy stationery. Sophia, it began, if you're reading this, you've at least considered accepting your inheritance. I want to explain why this matters so much to me. Blackwood Innovations was never just about making money. It began as a solution to a problem, our dependence on fossil fuels and the inefficiency of renewable energy storage. Every breakthrough, every patent, every company acquisition has served that original mission to help humanity transition away from carbon dependency. The work isn't finished. The next generation of storage technology is still in development. The implementation of our current systems is only at 30% of potential worldwide reach. The Foundation has barely scratched the surface of what it could accomplish with the right leadership. I'm not asking you to become me or to abandon your own path in medicine. I'm asking you to ensure that the mission continues, that the resources I've accumulated are directed with intelligence and compassion. You have those qualities. I've watched you manage impossible situations with grace and determination. I've seen your kindness to difficult customers and your unwavering focus on your goals. Whether you accept this inheritance or not, know that I am profoundly sorry. This is the greatest mistake of my life and one I cannot undo. All I can offer now is the truth of who you are and what rightfully belongs to you. With respect and hope, Harrison Sophia set the letter down, unexpected tears pricking her eyes. The words were compelling, touching something in her that responded to the idea of purpose beyond personal success. She'd always wanted to make a difference through medicine. What might she accomplish with the resources of a billion-dollar company behind her? The next morning, she connected with Dr. Chun via video call. The oncologist was a sharp-featured woman in her 50s with an air of brisk competence that Sophia immediately respected. "Miss Miller, Doctor," Chun greeted her. "Mr. Blackwood informed me of your relationship. He speaks very highly of your medical aptitude." "I'm still a student," Sophia clarified, "but I've been focusing on oncology, particularly aggressive cancers." Dr. Chun nodded. "Admirable. Now, you had questions about your father's treatment?" The word father still felt foreign, but Sophia let it pass. "Yes. I noticed a mutation in his genetic panel that might qualify him for the Mercer trial at UCSF. Dr. Chun's expression registered surprise, then interest. "The PARP inhibitor study? We considered that, but the initial criteria excluded patients with hepatic metastases. The criteria were updated last month," Sophia said. "I've been following Dr. Mercer's work. The Phase 2 trial was expanded to include patients with liver involvement below a certain threshold. Harrison's most recent scans might put him within range." Dr. Chun was silent for a moment, clearly reassessing both the situation and Sophia herself. "You're correct. I wasn't aware of the expansion. I'll contact Dr. Mercer's team immediately." "There's something else," Sophia continued, emboldened by the doctor's responsiveness. "The immunotherapy failure, have you considered it might be related to his microbiome profile rather than the cancer itself? There's some recent research suggesting gut bacteria composition can significantly impact immunotherapy efficacy." Now Dr. Chun was openly impressed. "You've done your homework, Miss Miller. We haven't explored that angle. It's worth investigating." She paused. "Would you be interested in joining our next team meeting to discuss your father's case?" The invitation represented a level of professional respect Sophia hadn't expected. "I would, yes." "Good. I'll send the details." Dr. Chun's expression softened slightly. "And Ms. Miller, this situation is unusual, but your father is lucky to have your perspective. Fresh eyes sometimes see what specialists miss." After the call ended, Sophia sat back in her chair, processing what had just happened. She'd been taken seriously by one of the top oncologists in the country. Her suggestions might actually help Harrison's treatment. It was a glimpse of what might be possible with the resources and influence Harrison was offering. The ability to move beyond suggestions to implementation, to fund the research she found promising, to accelerate the development of treatments that might save lives. For the first time, she allowed herself to truly consider accepting the inheritance, not just as a burden, but as an opportunity. Her phone chimed with a message from Harrison. "Dr. Chun just called. Thank you for your insights. She's arranging a consultation with UCSF immediately. Would you be available to join us for dinner tonight to discuss? Martin Chung and Genevieve Alvarez from the board would like to meet you." Sophia stared at the message. This was moving quickly. Perhaps too quickly. But if Harrison truly had only months left, time was a luxury they didn't have. "Yes," she texted back. "What time and where?" Harrison sent a car for Sophia, a sleek black Mercedes with tinted windows and a driver who addressed her as Ms. Miller, with a deference she found unsettling. This was how Harrison moved through the world, she realized, cushioned by luxury and efficiency, every detail arranged to minimize friction. The restaurant was not her familiar workplace, but a private dining establishment in one of the city's most exclusive buildings. Unlike the busy, white tablecloth restaurant where she served, this place had only 8 tables, widely spaced, with lighting that somehow made everyone look their best version of themselves. Harrison was waiting in a private room, standing when she entered. Beside him were 2 people. A distinguished Asian man in his 60s whom she recognized as Martin Chung, and a striking woman with silver-streaked black hair whom she assumed was Genevieve Alvarez. Sophia. Harrison greeted her, his voice warm but restrained. "Thank you for coming. May I introduce Martin Chung, Chief Financial Officer and my closest advisor, and Genevieve Alvarez, our Chief Legal Officer?" Martin stepped forward first, taking Sophia's hand in both of his. "Miss Miller, it's a pleasure to meet you properly. I've been hearing about you for some time." His words reminded her that these people had known about her long before she knew about them, an imbalance that left her feeling exposed. Genevieve's handshake was firmer, her assessment more direct. "Ms. Miller, your insights regarding Harrison's treatment options were impressive, Dr. Chun speaks very highly of you." "Thank you," Sophia replied, uncertain how to navigate this new territory where she was neither server nor guest but something undefined. "Please sit." Harrison gestured to the table, already set with fine china and crystal. "We've ordered a selection of dishes. I hope that's acceptable." Sophia nodded, taking a seat and immediately noticing how Harrison positioned himself so she could see both him and the others clearly. It was a small consideration, but one that suggested he'd thought about her comfort. Martin has been with me from the beginning, Harrison explained as servers poured water and wine. He was the first person to believe in the technology enough to invest his own savings. Harrison exaggerates, Martin said with a warm smile. I recognized a good opportunity. He did all the hard work. And Genevieve joined us 10 years ago. Harrison continued, after successfully defending us in a patent dispute. She's the reason our intellectual property remains secure and valuable. Someone had to keep the vultures at bay, Genevieve remarked dryly, particularly since Harrison was more interested in innovation than protection. The interaction revealed something Sophia hadn't expected. These weren't just employees or executives. They were Harrison's friends, people who had walked the long road with him. Dr. Chun informed me that UCSF has agreed to evaluate Harrison for the trial, Genevieve said, directing the conversation toward Sophia. That was your suggestion, I understand. It's a possibility worth exploring, Sophia replied cautiously. The trial has shown promising results in similar cases. You spotted a connection his entire medical team missed, Harrison said, pride evident in his voice. Sophia shifted uncomfortably. I just happen to be following that particular research closely. Martin leaned forward. That's precisely why Harrison believes you're the right person to guide the future of the company. You see connections others miss. You follow emerging research. You're not constrained by established thinking. The conversation was moving too quickly toward the inheritance, and Sophia felt her defenses rising. I'm a medical student, not a business person. I don't know the first thing about running a multi-billion-dollar company. Neither did Harrison when he started, Martin said, surprising her. He was a brilliant engineer with a revolutionary idea. He learned the business side because he had to, not because it came naturally. That's different, Sophia argued. He built it from the ground up. I'd be stepping into something enormous and fully formed. Which is why we're here, Genevieve said pragmatically. The board would continue managing operations. Martin would guide strategic decisions. My team would handle all legal matters. Your role would be to ensure the company and foundation remain true to their core purpose. And what is that purpose exactly? Sophia asked, genuinely curious about how they saw the mission. Harrison smiled slightly as if pleased by the question. To develop and deploy technologies that enable sustainable energy use worldwide, and to direct the resulting resources towards solving humanity's most pressing problems. That's ambitious, Sophia commented, taking a sip of water. Necessarily so, Harrison agreed. Climate change, resource scarcity, disease, these aren't problems that can be solved with half measures. For the next hour, as they moved through courses of exquisitely prepared food that Sophia barely tasted, Martin and Genevieve outlined the structure of Blackwood Innovations and the foundation, explaining how they work together and where Sophia would fit. The company generates the resources, Martin explained. The foundation deploys them strategically. Together, they're more powerful than either would be alone, like the research wing of a hospital, Sophia suggested, trying to frame it in terms she understood. The hospital treats patients today while the research develops treatments for tomorrow. Exactly, Harrison said, looking pleased with her analogy. And your medical background would bring a valuable perspective to both sides. As dinner concluded, Genevieve excused herself to take a call, and Martin stepped away to speak with the restaurant manager, leaving Sophia and Harrison momentarily alone. They like you, Harrison said quietly. They barely know me, Sophia countered. They know what matters, that you're intelligent, perceptive, and not easily impressed by wealth or status. Harrison's eyes crinkled slightly at the corner. You've never been deferential to me in 5 years of service, even when you knew exactly who I was. Sophia raised an eyebrow. Would you have preferred deference? God, no. It's exhausting. People who want something from you are never honest with you. He sighed. That's why your service was so refreshing. You treated me like a person, not a resource to be mined or an obstacle to overcome. This glimpse into Harrison's isolation surprised her. She had never considered the loneliness that might come with his position. May I ask you something personal? She ventured. Anything. Why didn't you ever marry? Have more children? Harrison considered the question carefully. After things ended with your mother, I threw myself completely into the company. By the time I came up for air, I was already successful, already a public figure. The women I met were interested in Harrison Blackwood, CEO, not in me as a person. That sounds lonely, Sophia said, surprising herself with the genuine sympathy in her voice. It was a choice, Harrison replied. Not necessarily a wise one, but a choice nonetheless. He paused. Your mother made a better one. She chose love, family, connection. Those photographs you saw, she was radiant, wasn't she? With Richard? Yes, Sophia agreed softly. She was happy with him. They were good together. Harrison nodded. I'm glad, truly. The sincerity in his voice touched something in Sophia. For the first time, she saw Harrison not as the intimidating billionaire or the absent father, but as a flawed person who had made choices he regretted. Martin and Genevieve returned, and the conversation shifted to next steps. We've arranged for you to tour the main research facility tomorrow if you're interested, Martin said, and the foundation headquarters the day after. Sophia hesitated. I have classes. We've spoken with your program director, Genevieve interjected smoothly. Given the exceptional circumstance, you've been granted flexibility to make up clinical hours later in the semester. Again, the sense that her life was being rearranged without her consent. You can't just keep doing that, Sophia said firmly. I appreciate the intention, but my education, my schedule, those are my domains. Instead of pushing back, Harrison nodded. You're right, we overstepped. Martin, please ensure that all future arrangements are proposed to Sophia for approval, not made on her behalf. The immediate correction surprised her, as did the respect with which Martin and Genevieve accepted the rebuke. Of course, Martin agreed.
Ms.
Miller, would you be interested in touring our facilities when your schedule permits? We could arrange it around your classes. The shift in approach mollified her somewhat. Yes, I would like to see them. I can rearrange my study group for tomorrow afternoon. As the evening concluded, Harrison walked Sophia to the waiting car. In the quiet hallway outside the restaurant, he spoke in a lower, more personal tone. Thank you for coming tonight and for looking into the trial. Whatever you decide about the inheritance, I'm grateful for that. Sophia studied him in the muted light. Why didn't you tell me sooner about being my father? Harrison's expression tightened with regret, fear at first, then a kind of superstition, as if telling you might somehow derail the life you were building, and finally shame. The longer I waited, the more impossible it seemed to justify. His honesty was disarming. I might not have been ready before now, Sophia admitted. I've been so focused on medical school, on surviving financially, and now? She took a deep breath. I'm still processing everything, but I'm willing to learn more about the company, the foundation, to understand what accepting this inheritance would really mean. Relief and hope flickered across Harrison's face. That's all I can ask for. As the car pulled away, Sophia reflected on how quickly her life was changing. A week ago, her biggest concern had been her pathology final. Now she was contemplating inheriting a global corporation while trying to help save the life of a father she'd just discovered. The universe had a strange sense of humor. The Blackwood Innovations Research Facility occupied an entire campus on the outskirts of the city, 5 gleaming buildings of glass and sustainable materials, surrounded by carefully maintained grounds where employees ate lunch at scattered picnic tables. Solar panels covered every rooftop, and a small wind farm hummed in the distance. Sophia stood in the main atrium, staring up at a massive installation that demonstrated the company's core technology, an energy storage system that captured and released power with unprecedented efficiency. The display showed real-time data from implementations worldwide, pulsing with the energy flowing through cities and remote villages alike. Impressive, isn't it? Martin said, appearing beside her. When Harrison first described his vision, I thought it was impossible. Now it powers 30% of the world's renewable energy storage. It's hard to comprehend the scale, Sophia admitted. Come. Martin gestured toward a corridor. The interesting work happens in the labs for the next 2 hours. Sophia toured research departments developing next-generation technologies, more efficient batteries, new applications for existing systems, and materials that could revolutionize how energy was captured and stored. Each team leader greeted her with a mixture of curiosity and deference, clearly briefed on her potential future role but uncertain how to interact with her. In the third building, they entered a section marked Bioenergy Division. Here, scientists in white coats were working with what appeared to be biological samples. This is our newest division, Martin explained, exploring the intersection of biological systems and energy storage. A woman in her 40s approached them, her enthusiastic stride betraying excitement barely contained by professional decorum. Miss Miller, I'm Dr. Lydia Patel, division head. We're thrilled you're visiting. What exactly are you working on here? Sophia asked, intrigued despite herself. Dr. Patel led them to a workstation where microscopes were trained on what looked like plant material. We're studying how certain organisms, particularly specialized bacteria and modified plant cells, can store and release energy. Nature has been perfecting these systems for billions of years. We're learning from them. The applications for medical technology would be significant, Sophia observed, leaning closer to examine a display showing cellular activity. Exact. Dr. Patel's eyes lit up. Imagine implantable power sources for medical devices that draw energy from the body's own system, or diagnostic tools powered by the same biochemical reactions they're designed to detect. Has any of this been applied to cancer research? Sophia asked, the question emerging before she could censor herself. Dr. Patel exchanged a quick glance with Martin. We've had preliminary discussions, but it's not our primary focus yet, though it could be, Martin added quietly. With the right direction, the implication was clear. If Sophia took the helm, she could redirect resources toward medical applications that aligned with her interests. The possibility was tantalizing, yet it felt manipulative, as if they were dangling exactly what would appeal to her most. I'd like to see the foundation next, Sophia said, changing the subject. The Blackwood Foundation occupied a more modest building downtown, still impressive but less corporate in its architecture. Inside, the walls displayed photographs of projects worldwide, solar installations in remote villages, educational programs in underserved communities, environmental restoration efforts. We operate on a simple principle, explained Diane Foster, the Foundation's executive director. Identify the most pressing needs, find the most effective solution, and implement them without bureaucratic obstacles. How do you measure effectiveness? Sophia asked, always the pragmatist. Rigorously, Diane replied with approval. Every program has clear metrics and evaluation periods. We don't continue funding initiatives that don't produce measurable results, no matter how noble the intention. This approach resonated with Sophia's scientific mindset. And the medical research programs? Diane led her to a conference room where monitors displayed ongoing research initiatives. Currently, we focus on neglected tropical diseases, antibiotic resistance, and maternal health in developing regions. We're guided by data on where investment can save the most lives per dollar spent. No cancer research? Sophia asked, thinking of Harrison. Limited, Diane admitted. It's a well-funded area already. Our impact analysis suggested our resources would save more lives elsewhere. Though that analysis was conducted before Harrison's diagnosis, Martin added, priorities can evolve based on new information and leadership direction. Again, the subtle suggestion that Sophia could redirect resources toward her interests. It was both empowering and uncomfortable. By late afternoon, Sophia's head was spinning with information and possibilities. Martin had arranged for a car to take her home, but she found herself asking to see Harrison instead. She needed to speak with him directly, away from the carefully orchestrated tours. Harrison was in a meeting when she arrived at his office, the top floor of a downtown tower bearing the Blackwood name. His assistant, a poised woman named Rebecca, immediately cleared his schedule when Sophia introduced herself. "Me-R. Blackwood has standing instructions that you're to be given priority access at any time," she explained, leading Sophia to a spacious office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Minutes later, Harrison entered, clearly surprised but pleased to see her. "Sophia, I didn't expect you today. I've just finished touring the research facility in the foundation," she said, remaining standing. "I need to ask you something directly." "Of course." Harrison gestured to comfortable seating by the windows, away from the imposing desk that dominated one side of the room. Once seated, Sophia gathered her thoughts. "Everyone I've met today has subtly or not so subtly suggested that if I accept this inheritance, I could redirect company and foundation resources toward cancer research. Is that you're doing? A strategy to convince me?" Harrison looked genuinely taken aback. "No. I've given no such direction." He paused. "Though I'm not entirely surprised. Martin and the others are perceptive. They can see where your interests lie, and they're naturally highlighting aspects of the business that might appeal to you." "It feels manipulative," Sophia admitted. "It wasn't my intention," Harrison said, then reconsidered, "though perhaps there's manipulation inherent in the situation itself. I am, after all, offering you extraordinary resources with the hope that you'll use them in ways I would approve of." His candor was disarming. "At least you admit it. I've spent a lifetime managing people with agendas, Sophia. The least I can do is recognize my own." A small smile touched his lips. "How did you find the tours otherwise?" "Overwhelming," she admitted. "The scale of what you've built, it's hard to comprehend." "I didn't build it alone," Harrison said, glancing at photographs on the wall showing him with teams of people over the years. Martin, Genevieve, thousands of brilliant engineers and scientists and administrators. I just had the initial idea and the stubbornness to pursue it. Sophia followed his gaze to the photographs, noting how he had aged through them from a young man with fire in his eyes to the more measured leader he was now. "The UCSF trial," she said, changing the subject. "Dr. Chun called me this morning. They've agreed to evaluate you as a candidate." Harrison nodded. "Yes, she informed me as well. The initial screening is scheduled for tomorrow. I'd like to accompany you," Sophia said, surprising herself with the offer. "If you're comfortable with that, I would appreciate it," Harrison replied, his voice softening. "Very much." An awkward silence fell between them, neither quite knowing how to navigate this new dynamic. Not quite father and daughter, not quite patient and doctor, caught in some undefined territory between. "May I ask you something?" Harrison finally said. "Fair is fair. What would you do if you accepted the inheritance? Not what others have suggested you might do. What would you want to do?" Sophia considered the question carefully. It was the first time anyone had asked what she wanted, rather than telling her what was possible. "I'd want to bridge the gap between energy technology and medical applications," she said slowly, the vision forming as she spoke. "Develop power systems for medical devices that could work anywhere without infrastructure. Create diagnostic tools that could be deployed in regions without reliable electricity." She paused. "And yes, I'd direct significant resources toward cancer research, not just because of your diagnosis, but because it's an area where technology and biology intersect in ways we're only beginning to understand." Harrison was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read, something between pride and sorrow. "That's a worthy vision. It's just ideas," Sophia said, suddenly self-conscious. "I don't know if any of it is practical. All meaningful change begins as just ideas," Harrison countered. "My fortune began as scribbles on napkins in a college cafeteria." He rose and walked to his desk, returning with a small leather-bound journal. "Here. My original notes for the technology that eventually became our core business. Look at how crude the initial concepts were." Sophia opened the journal, finding pages of handwritten equations and rough diagrams. The ideas were brilliant but unrefined, the seeds of what she'd seen fully grown at the research facility. "You refined them," she said, "over time, with help," Harrison added, "always with help." The journal felt significant in her hands, not just a record of technological evolution, but a symbol of human potential, of what could be accomplished with vision and persistence. "I should go," Sophia said, closing the journal and returning it. "I have studying to do before tomorrow's appointment." "Of course." Harrison walked her to the door. "Sophia... Thank you for considering all of this, for looking into the trial, for giving me a chance to know you, even a little." The sincerity in his voice touched something in her. "I'll see you tomorrow at UCSF, 10 o'clock. I'll be there." As she left the building, Sophia felt something shifting within her. Not forgiveness exactly, not yet, but perhaps the beginning of understanding. Harrison Blackwood had failed as a father, but he had succeeded extraordinarily in other ways. The question now was whether those successes could have any meaning for her, whether she could take what he offered effort and shape it into something that reflected her own values and vision. For the first time, she allowed herself to truly imagine what it would mean to say yes. The University of California, San Francisco Medical Center stood like a beacon of modern medicine, its architecture a blend of function and inspiration. Sophia arrived 15 minutes early for Harrison's appointment. Nervously adjusting her blazer in the lobby, she dressed more professionally, aware that she was straddling multiple roles today. Harrison arrived precisely on time, accompanied by Dr. Chun. He looked more vulnerable in this medical setting than he had in his corporate domain, still impeccably dressed, but somehow diminished against the backdrop of the hospital's clinical efficiency. Sophia, he greeted her with evident relief. "Thank you for coming, Doctor." Chun extended her hand. "Miss Miller, good to meet you in person. Your insight regarding this trial may prove invaluable." They were escorted to a consultation room where Dr. Mercer, the trial's principal investigator, was waiting. He was younger than Sophia had expected, with the intense focus of a scientist who lived and breathed his research. "Miss Blackwood," he began, then nodded to Sophia. "And you must be Ms. Miller. Dr. Chun mentioned you're a medical student with a special interest in our work." "Yes," Sophia replied, deciding not to complicate matters by explaining their relationship. "I've been following your publications on PARP inhibition in aggressive cancers." "Excellent, Doctor," Mercer said, clearly pleased to meet someone familiar with his research. "Then you understand the mechanism we're targeting." For the next hour, Dr. Mercer outlined the trial protocol, explaining how the experimental drug worked to prevent cancer cells from repairing their DNA, causing them to die. He reviewed Harrison's medical history and the genetic markers that made him a potential candidate. Sophia listened intently, asking precise questions about dosing schedules, side effect management, and previous outcome. Her medical knowledge, combined with her intimate understanding of Harrison's case, allowed her to bridge the gap between patient and researcher in a way that visibly impressed both doctors. "You have a good advocate here, Mr. Blackwood, Doctor," Mercer commented, glancing at Sophia with approval. "She's more than an advocate," Harrison said quietly. "She's my daughter." The simple statement, spoken without qualification or explanation, landed in the room with unexpected weight. It was the first time Harrison had introduced her as his daughter to anyone outside the immediate circle who already knew. Dr. Mercer's eyebrows rose slightly, but he nodded with understanding. "Then you're fortunate indeed. Medical knowledge within the family can make a significant difference in navigating complex treatments." After reviewing scans and lab results, Dr. Mercer confirmed what Sophia had hoped. Harrison qualified for the trial. "We can begin the protocol next week, assuming you wish to proceed." "I do," Harrison said without hesitation. "Whatever time I have left, I'd prefer to spend it actively fighting rather than passively waiting." As they left the consultation room, Dr. Chun was called away to another patient, leaving Sophia and Harrison alone in the corridor. "Would you join me for lunch?" Harrison asked. "There's a cafe in the hospital that's supposed to be decent." The request was tentative, lacking the certainty he displayed in business setting. Sophia realized he was genuinely unsure of her answer, afraid of rejection on this personal level. "Yes," she agreed. "I'm hungry, and we should discuss the treatment plan." The cafe was surprisingly pleasant for hospital food service, with natural light streaming through large windows and a menu focused on fresh, nutritious options. They found a quiet table in the corner, away from the main traffic of hospital staff and visitors. "You were impressive in there," Harrison said after they'd ordered. "The questions you asked, the connections you made, Dr. Mercer doesn't impress easily." "I was just applying what I've learned," Sophia demurred. "No, it was more than that. You have an intuitive grasp of complex systems, how variables interact, where to look for overlooked possibilities." Harrison smiled slightly. "You remind me of myself at your age, except you're applying those skills to medicine instead of engineering." The comparison unsettled her. "I'm not like you." "In some ways you are," Harrison insisted gently. "The focus, the drive, the ability to see patterns others miss, those aren't learned traits, Sophia. They're innate." She wanted to resist the idea that she had inherited anything meaningful from him, yet she couldn't deny the similarities he identified. Her mother had often remarked on her singular focus, her ability to see connections others missed, even as a child. "If I have those traits," she said carefully, "it's because I developed them through hard work and necessity." "I'm not trying to take credit," Harrison clarified, "just acknowledging a recognition. And when I watch you work, I see echoes of myself, that's all." Their food arrived, a grilled vegetable sandwich for Sophia, a protein-rich salad for Harrison. She noticed he merely picked at his food, another subtle reminder of his illness. "The side effects of the trial medication will be significant," Sophia said, shifting to safer clinical territory. "Fatigue, nausea, potential immunosuppression. You should consider adjusting your work schedule." "Martin is already handling most day-to-day operations," Harrison replied. "Has been for months, really. I've been focusing on transition planning." The unspoken implication hung between them. Transition to her if she accepted. "I have questions," Sophia said, setting down her sandwich. "About the company, the inheritance." "Practical question." "I expected nothing less," Harrison said, looking relieved at her engagement. "Ask anything. If I accept, what would be required of me immediately?" "I can't abandon medical school." "Nothing would be required immediately," Harrison assured her. "Maintain operational control for up to 3 years, or until you completed your medical training, whichever comes first. You would attend quarterly meetings, be consulted on major decisions, but the day-to-day management would continue without disruption." interruption. And after that transition period, you would assume whatever level of control you wanted, Harrison explained. You could remain hands-off, serving as chairperson while professional management runs operations, or you could take a more active role. The structure's flexible by design, Sophia nodded, processing this. The foundation, would I have immediate authority there? Yes, the foundation is governed separately, with you as the controlling trustee from day one. That was deliberate. I wanted you to be able to direct philanthropic resources according to your priorities without corporate constraints. It was a thoughtful distinction, one that gave her immediate influence over the aspect of the inheritance most aligned with her value. And if I decide this isn't for me after trying it, she asked, voicing her deepest concern. If I accept and then change my mind? Harrison had clearly anticipated this question. There are exit provisions. You could transfer control to the independent board permanently or designate another entity to receive your shares. The only limitation is that the core mission cannot be abandoned, and the company cannot be sold to competitors who would dismantle the technology. The careful planning revealed how thoroughly Harrison had thought about this, perhaps for years. It wasn't a hasty decision made in the face of mortality, but a deliberate strategy he had refined over time. One last question, Sophia said, meeting his gaze directly. Why me? Not just because I'm your biological daughter. You could have established a foundation, created a trust, left it all to Martin or Genevieve or any number of capable people. Why place this burden on someone you barely know? Harrison set down his fork, considering her question with the seriousness it deserved. 2 reasons, he finally said. First, the practical. You possess qualities the company and foundation will need for the next phase. Scientific understanding, medical insight, fresh perspective, and most importantly, values that align with the mission. You care about making a difference, not just accumulating wealth or power. He paused before continuing, his voice soft. The second reason is more personal. This company, this foundation, they're my legacy. The only meaningful thing I've built. For years, I told myself that was enough, that the impact of the work itself was what mattered. But facing death has a way of clarifying what's important. I realized I wanted my legacy to be connected to something more human, more personal. His vulnerability was disarming. You want your company to stay in the family. I want my life's work to have meaning beyond quarterly reports and stock valuations, Harrison corrected. I want it to be part of something continuing, something living. And yes, I want to give you something of value, not to compensate for my absence, which is impossible, but because that's what fathers are supposed to do. Give their children the best tools they can to build their own lives. The sincerity in his voice touched something in Sophia. For all his wealth and power, Harrison Blackwood was, in this moment, simply a man facing his mortality, trying to create meaning from the time he had left. I'm not ready to decide yet, Sophia said gently, but I'm considering it seriously. And in the meantime, I'll be there for your treatments, as much as my schedule allows. Relief and gratitude washed across Harrison's face. That's more than I have any right to ask for. As they finished their meal, Sophia realized something had shifted between them. The relationship remained complicated, freighted with the past, and uncertain in its future, but in this moment, they had found a fragile connection, not as server and served, not even as father and daughter in the conventional sense, but as 2 people sharing a path neither had expected to walk together. The trial began the following week. Sophia rearranged her clinical rotations to be present for Harrison's first treatment, arriving at UCSF Medical Center early to review the protocol once more. She found herself slipping naturally into a clinical mindset. This was a patient with pancreatic cancer, a difficult case requiring careful management. The fact that the patient was also her biological father remained a complicated emotional undertone, but her medical training provided a framework that made the situation more navigable. Harrison arrived looking composed, though Sophia detected the subtle signs of anxiety, a slight tension in his jaw, fingers that drummed momentarily on the armrest before he consciously stilled them. Dr. Chun accompanied him, along with a trial nurse who would administer the treatment. You look professional, Harrison remarked, taking in Sophia's white coat. She'd decided to wear it today, partly as armor, partly to signal her role to the medical team. I'm here as a medical student, she replied, not unkindly. It helps me focus. The treatment itself was anticlimactic and 4 infusion that took 90 minutes. During which Harrison answered emails on his tablet and Sophia reviewed case notes for her upcoming exams. The real challenge would come in the hours and days that followed, as the medication began its work of disrupting the cancer cells' ability to repair themselves, with inevitable collateral damage to healthy cells. When the infusion finished, Dr. Chun reviewed the monitoring protocol and side effect management. The first 72 hours are critical, she explained. Mr. Blackwood, you should not be alone during this period. My staff is well prepared, Harrison assured her, and I have a private nurse scheduled in shift. Sophia found herself asking before she'd fully processed the thought. Would it be helpful if I stayed with him for part of that time? She quickly clarified, from a medical perspective, I mean. To observe the initial response and side effect profile, Dr. Chun's expression showed approval. That would be extremely valuable, both for MR, Blackwood's care, and for your education. These novel therapies aren't something most medical students get exposure. Harrison looked startled, then carefully contained his reaction. Only if it doesn't interfere with your studies, Sophia. I can bring my materials, she said. I'd study better with a concrete purpose anyway. The arrangement was made. Sophia would spend the evening at Harrison's penthouse, monitoring his initial response to the treatment, with the private nurse taking over in the morning. It was a clinical decision that nonetheless edged them further into personal territory, a blending of roles that was becoming increasingly difficult to compartmentalize. Harrison's penthouse was even more impressive in daylight than it had been during her first visit. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased a panoramic view of the city, while the interior was a study in understated luxury, clean lines, original artwork, and technology that disappeared seamlessly into the design. The guest room is prepared, Harrison said, gesturing down a hallway. Rebecca arranged for everything you might need. Rebecca, Sophia had learned, was not just Harrison's executive assistant, but something closer to a household manager, the person who made his complicated life function smoothly. She had greeted Sophia with professional warmth and a tablet containing detailed information about Harrison's medication schedule, dietary restrictions, and emergency protocols. I'll be monitoring your vitals every hour for the first 6 hours, Sophia explained, falling back on clinical procedure as a way to normalize the strange intimacy of the situation. The nurse will take over at 7 a.m. Harrison nodded, already looking more fatigued than he had at the hospital. I apologize in advance if this isn't how you envisioned spending your evening. I'm getting practical experience with cutting-edge oncology treatments, Sophia replied pragmatically. That's valuable for my education. They settled into an awkward routine, Sophia checking Harrison's temperature, blood pressure, and oxygen saturation at regular intervals. Harrison attempting to work on his laptop despite growing fatigue. By early evening, the first wave of side effects arrived. Nausea that had him excusing himself to the bathroom, followed by a bone-deep weariness that eventually forced him to abandon his work. You should rest, Sophia advised, her clinical voice masking her concern at how quickly the medication had affected him. Pushing through will only tax your system further. Harrison reluctantly relocated to the living room sofa, allowing Sophia to arrange pillows behind him and check his pulse once more. The role reversal was striking. The powerful CEO now depended on the waitress he had observed for years. This is strange for you, Harrison observed, his voice raspier than usual. A bit, Sophia acknowledged. I'm used to bringing you sparkling water, not monitoring your heart rate. A hint of his usual dry humor returned. The service has certainly improved. As evening deepened into night, Harrison's condition stabilized, the nausea controlled by medication, his vitals within acceptable parameters. Sophia encouraged him to eat a light meal prepared by the household chef before he retired to his bedroom, leaving his door ajar at her request, so she could monitor him throughout the night. Left alone in the vast living room, Sophia took the opportunity to truly look around. Unlike the corporate spaces she'd toured, Harrison's personal domain revealed more about the man himself. Bookshelves held an eclectic collection, engineering texts alongside philosophy, biographies, and surprisingly poetry. A vintage record player sat near comfortable reading chairs with a collection of jazz albums nearby. One wall featured photographs not of business achievements but of natural wonders: mountains, forests, deserts. Often with Harrison alone in the frame, a solitary figure in majestic landscapes. It was the home of someone both intellectual and solitary, a man who found companionship in ideas rather than people. Sophia couldn't help wondering if his isolation was choice, consequence, or some combination of both. She was studying a particularly striking photograph of Harrison on what appeared to be a Himalayan peak when his voice startled her. Annapurna, he said from the hallway entrance, leaning slightly against the wall for support. 10 years ago. You should be resting, Sophia admonished, her clinical concern returning. Couldn't sleep, he admitted. Too many thoughts. He looked vulnerable in simple lounge pants and a t-shirt, his feet bare, his hair slightly mussed, so different from the impeccably presented man who had occupied table 7 every Tuesday for 5 years. Would you like some tea? Sophia offered. It might help you relax. Harrison nodded gratefully, and they moved to the kitchen, where Sophia found an impressive array of loose-leaf teas. She selected a herbal blend with chamomile and prepared 2 cups. You climb mountains, she observed, returning to the photograph as the tea steeped. Used to, Harrison corrected. It was my one indulgence outside of work. The absolute solitude, the physical challenge, the perspective it provides, ... single quotes perspective. When you're at altitude looking down at the world, problems that seemed insurmountable appear tiny, Harrison explained. Corporate rivalries, board disputes, market fluctuations, they all shrink to insignificance compared to the mountain. Sophia handed him his tea, understanding something new about him. You needed that escape. More than I realized, he admitted, though I haven't been able to climb since the diagnosis. Another loss among many. The simple acknowledgement of his grief touched something in Sophia. She had been so focused on her own complex feelings about Harrison that she hadn't fully considered what he was experiencing, not just physical illness, but the steady accumulation of losses as cancer stripped away the life he had built. Tell me about it, she said, surprising herself. The climbing. Harrison looked momentarily taken aback, then grateful. As they sat with their tea, he described expeditions to peaks around the world, the challenges, the beauty, the moments of transcendence. Sophia listened, asking occasional questions, seeing a different side of him emerge. Not the billionaire, not the absent father, but simply a person with passions and experiences that had shaped him. The last major climb was K2, he said. 2 years before the diagnosis. I had no symptoms then, felt stronger than I had in years. He paused, reflective. I remember standing at the summit thinking I had conquered something significant. Now I wonder if the cancer was already growing inside me even then. An invisible adversary I couldn't see or fight. The vulnerability in his voice struck Sophia deeply. Medicine is making advances every day, she said, falling back on clinical reassurance. The trial could, Sophia, Harrison interrupted gently. We both know the statistics. Even with this trial, the prognosis isn't good. I've made my peace with that. Have you? She challenged, suddenly fierce. If you truly had, you wouldn't be so determined to establish your legacy, to make sure your company continues exactly as you envision it, instead of defensiveness. Harrison's expression showed a kind of respect for her insight. Touché, perhaps I'm still wrestling with it, but I'm trying to be realistic while still hoping for more time. More time for what? Sophia asked softly. Harrison met her gaze directly. To get to know my daughter, to see if she might forgive me eventually, to witness her becoming the extraordinary person she's clearly meant to be. The simple honesty of his answer caught Sophia off guard. Before she could formulate a response, a wave of pain crossed Harrison's face, his hand pressing against his abdomen. That's enough philosophy for tonight, Sophia said, shifting back to her medical role. You need rest, and I need to check your vitals again. Harrison didn't argue, allowing her to guide him back to his bedroom. As she took his blood pressure one more time, she noticed how thin his wrist felt beneath her fingers. The prominent veins and tendons a testament to the weight he had already lost to the disease. Hugh, he said as she recorded the measurements. Not just for tonight, but for giving me any chance at all. Sophia nodded, unable to articulate her own complicated feelings. Try to sleep. I'll check on you throughout the night. As she dimmed the lights and left his room, she realized that something fundamental had shifted. She had come here as a medical student monitoring a patient. She would leave as something more complex. Not quite a daughter in the traditional sense, but no longer a stranger either. The mountains Harrison had described, with their perspective-altering heights, seemed an apt metaphor for her own situation. Looking down from this unexpected vantage point, the landscape of her life appeared different. The familiar contours rearranged into a new pattern she was only beginning to understand. Tuesday arrived with its familiar rhythm, the restaurant preparing for lunch service, silverware being polished, tables arranged with precision. Sophia stood in the employee locker room, her uniform pressed and ready, though she hadn't worn it in weeks. Vincent approached, his expression concerned. You don't need to do this, Sophie. Your leave of absence, I want to, she interrupted gently. It's important. In the 3 months since Harrison's first trial treatment, Sophia's life had transformed in ways she was still processing. She had continued her medical studies while monitoring Harrison's response to the experimental drug. Initial results had been promising. Tumor markers decreasing slightly, certain symptoms improving, but the latest scans had revealed the cancer adapting, finding pathways around the treatment. Dr. Mercer was already adjusting the protocol, combining approaches, fighting for every week of stability they could achieve. During this time, Sophia had gradually integrated herself into Harrison's world, attending board meetings at Black Innovations as an observer, shadowing foundation leaders to understand their work, and spending increasingly personal time with Harrison himself. Their relationship remained complicated, marked by moments of connection interrupted by painful awareness of the lost years, but it had evolved into something neither had anticipated. A genuine, if belated, bond. Today marked exactly 5 years since Harrison had first sat at table 7, the day their strange, silent ritual had begun. Sophia had requested to serve him one last time, a symmetry that felt necessary, a closing of a circle that had opened when she was a different person, living a different life. Harrison arrived precisely at noon, as he always had. He looked thinner, more fragile, yet his eyes remained sharp, observant. He wore his usual suit, though it hung more loosely on his frame. When he saw Sophia in her waitress uniform, a complex emotion crossed his face. Recognition, memory, a touch of sadness. Table 7? She asked, the familiar professional smile in place, though transformed by all that now lay between them. Please, he replied, following the script they had established over half a decade. She led him to the window table, his table, and presented the menu with the practiced grace of a professional server. Would you like sparkling water? No ice? Yes, thank you. The restaurant continued around them, other servers taking orders, the kitchen humming with activity, but table 7 existed in its own pocket of time, a space where past and present converged. Sophia brought his water, set it down precisely as she always had. Are you ready to order, sir? Steak, medium rare, no sauce, Harrison said, then added with a small smile. Some traditions are worth maintaining. She nodded, taking the menu. I'll place your order right away, single quotes as she walked to the kitchen. Sophia felt the weight of the envelope in her apron pocket, the envelope she had prepared for this moment. Its contents represented weeks of consideration, countless conversations with her mother, with Aiden, with herself, and late-night deliberations. When she returned with his meal, Harrison looked up at her with an expression of quiet acceptance. It feels strange to be here again, doesn't it? Like looking backward and forward simultaneously. Yes, Sophia agreed, dropping the professional facade momentarily. A lot has changed, and a lot remains to be determined, Harrison acknowledged. I've asked a lot of you, Sophia. Too much, perhaps. You've offered a lot, she corrected gently. The asking and the accepting are different things. He nodded. understanding the distinction. Will you join me, just for a moment? It was a breach of restaurant protocol, but Vincent, watching from across the room, gave a subtle nod of permission. Sophia sat across from Harrison where no one had sat during his Tuesday visits for 5 years. I have something for you, she said, removing the envelope from her pocket and placing it on the table between them. Harrison looked at it with curiosity. What's this? My decision, Sophia explained, about the inheritance. The company, all of it. I wanted to give it to you here, where everything began. Harrison's hand hesitated over the envelope. Whatever you've decided, I want you to know. Open it first, Sophia interrupted gently. Then we'll talk. With careful fingers, Harrison opened the envelope and removed several documents. The first was a letter, written in Sophia's precise handwriting. As he read, his expression shifted from anticipation to surprise to something deeper, a complex emotion that seemed to catch in his throat. You've accepted, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. With conditions, Sophia clarified. The documents outline my terms. Harrison reviewed the additional papers, which detailed Sophia's vision for both the company and foundation. She'd worked with Martin and Genevieve to craft a framework that would allow her to complete her medical training while gradually assuming leadership. And the foundation's priorities had been restructured to create a new, division focused on medical technology for underserved communities, with significant resources allocated to pancreatic cancer research. This is remarkable, Harrison said, scanning the detailed plans. You've thought of everything. I had good advisors, Sophia acknowledged, and a compelling example of both what to do and what not to do. Harrison smiled at that, recognizing the gentle criticism. Your modifications to the foundation's structure are brilliant. The medical technology initiative in particular, it bridges my worlds, Sophia explained. Medicine and your technology, it seemed the most logical integration. Not just logical, inspired. Harrison set the papers down carefully. May I ask what convinced you? Sophia considered the question. Many things. The potential to do good on a scale I couldn't achieve alone. The brilliance of the people already doing the work. The alignment with my own values and interests. She paused. And yes, the connection to you. Not just as my biological father, but as someone whose vision created something meaningful. Harrison's eyes shone with barely contained emotion. Thank you, not just for accepting, but for finding a way to make it truly yours. There's one more thing, Sophia said, nodding toward the final document in the stack. Harrison turned to it, a proposed modification to the company's official name. Blackwood Innovations would become Blackwood Miller Innovations. I want to honor both sides of my heritage, Sophia explained. Richard Miller raised me, loved me, shaped who I am, and you, ... You built something remarkable that I'm now connected to. The name should reflect that continuity and change. Harrison blinked rapidly, clearly moved. It's perfect, he said simply. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of what they'd established settling between them. Not just a business arrangement, not just an inheritance, but a recognition of a complex truth that lives can intersect in unexpected ways. That connection can be found even after years of absence. That legacy is more than blood or money or power. You should eat your steak before it gets cold, Sophia finally said, nodding toward the untouched meal. Harrison picked up his knife and fork. Will you stay? Just for a while longer? Actually, Sophia said with a small smile, I have the rest of the day off. Vincent approved it specially. Then perhaps, Harrison suggested carefully, you might join me for a proper lunch? As Sophia, not as my server, I'd like that. Sophia stood and removed her apron, hanging it on a nearby hook with a sense of finality. She signaled to Vincent, who immediately understood, bringing another place setting and taking her order. As they shared a meal at table 7, no longer server and serve, but two people connected by blood choice and a shared vision for the future, Sophia reflected on the strange path that had led them here. 5 years of silent observation followed by 3 months of intense connection, a life that had seemed set in its course now opening into unexpected territory. The trial treatment was buying Harrison time, not a cure, but precious months that might extend to a year or more with the right combination. Months they would use to forge whatever relationship was possible in the shadow of his illness, to transfer knowledge and vision, to bridge the gap between strangers and family. Do you know what I thought the first time you served me? Harrison asked, interrupting her reflection. What? I thought, she has her mother's grace and her grandfather's eyes. I was so struck by it that I nearly introduced myself then and there. He shook his head at the memory. Fear stopped me. Fear of rejection, of disrupting your life, confronting my own failures. And now? Sophia asked. Now I see someone entirely her own, Harrison replied. Neither Catherine nor me nor anyone else. Uniquely Sophia, and I'm grateful for whatever time I have to know her. The simplicity of his statement touched her deeply. In all the complexity of inheritance and legacy, this was perhaps the truest gift. Recognition of her as herself, separate from yet connected to the complicated history that had brought them together. To time, then, Sophia said, raising her water glass in a toast. To time, Harrison agreed, and what we choose to do with it. Outside the restaurant windows, the city continued its rhythms. People hurrying to meeting, deals being made, lives intersecting in countless ways. Inside at table 7, a waitress who had served the same billionaire for 5 years sat across from him as his daughter, heir, and in some new evolving way his friend. The circle that had begun with a simple order, sparkling water, No ice, now expanded into something neither could have imagined. A future they would partly shape together, however brief it might be, built on truth instead of silence, presence instead of absence, and the choice to connect despite all that suggested they shouldn't. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. The cancer remained, the lost years couldn't be recovered. The relationship would always carry the shadow of what might have been. But in accepting both the inheritance and the complicated truth of her connection to Harrison Black, Sophia Miller had found something she hadn't known she was seeking. Not just answers about her past or resources for her future, but a chance to integrate all the pieces of herself into something whole and authentic and uniquely her own. For now, that was enough. For now, that was everything.